Mo Facts with Adam Curry for December 30th, 2019. This is episode number 19. What the heck is this, Mo? What did you send me?
This is Main Source.
Yeah?
Looking at the front door.
Should I know this?
It's a little obscure hip hop from the 90s. So,
Oh, no. 90s, I was like building a company and I didn't give a crap. You know, Bill Clinton got impeached. I had no idea. Doing completely different things. Okay. That's nice, though. I like it a lot, man. Hey, Mo, how are you? Happy Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, sir. How you doing?
Yeah, good. We haven't spoken for a little bit. In fact, just before we got started, someone on Twitter was giving us crap, saying, "Hey, where's the Mo Facts? You guys are slacking." Like, man, it's end of the year. We know the M5M goes on a holiday, but we actually try to do something for y'all.
Right, we should bring in the B team. I mean, like everybody else.
Yeah, the life of a podcaster. Now, did you have do you have a nice Christmas? Does a lot of your family come over? How do I see that? Because you got like 18 kids.
Yes, that I know of. No, we had a great Christmas. My mom was came to visit. She just went home today, so I've been loved up.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Sleep deprived due to the kids. You know, they get up hella early in the morning. So I'm running low on sleep and high on love.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I had my stepdaughters were over.
Okay.
And Christina she was with her mom this year, so she's here next year, and she was in Rotterdam. But it was nice, man.
Nice.
Pretty uneventful, nice. Everyone happy. You know, just enough to drink. Perfect.
About the same here without the drinking.
Which brings us to Mo Facts, the last one for this year. And now we'd kind of left it after the last episode. We're like, oh, I'm going to wrap up end of year stuff. And I realized, about an hour ago, like, I really have no idea what we're doing. So I am ready to embark on the journey.
This is going to be the Black Vote episode.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about a few things that we promised that we were going to talk about: the Southern strategy, why do Black people vote Democratic, and why I refuse to vote. Why I'm abstaining from voting. So I promised to answer those questions, and I think those will be answered in this episode.
I can't wait. It should be over in 17 minutes?
So we have let's just get right into it. The history of the Black vote and what it means for 2020.
In 2020, we think that at least 1 out of every 4 votes that are cast in the Democratic primaries for president are going to come from Black voters. It's very possible that will be the highest number we've ever seen before. It's very possible we will look back at 2020 and say the Black vote was never more important than in 2020. To put this in some context, we've put together here something I think is very interesting. Exit polls starting in 1976 from past Democratic presidential primaries. 1976 was basically the first year that media outlets like NBC began sponsoring these primary exit polls, whether it's the New York primary, the New Hampshire primary, the Florida primary. And so we have a record. That record, though, a lot of it has been buried. We have been able to resurface, we think, every primary since 1976 on the Democratic side where there has been a significant Black vote in that primary and where an exit poll was conducted. We found it. We've put it all together here, and you get a look here at how the Black vote has gone in each one of these competitive Democratic races. And a couple of things stand out.
Now that I understand exactly what this episode is going to be about, I want to tell all the listeners that they are very lucky. You are going to get an education that will make you smarter than anybody else you know. Because this, I think, is probably right, and I'm surprised NBC did this, so I can't wait to hear more. This could be a very important lesson.
And this is a very important election. As the broadcaster said, 1 out of every 4 votes that's going to be cast in the primary is going to be a Black vote.
Right.
We've already spoke about the numbers in the previous episodes of how they need around 67% turnout for Democrats to be successful in the general election.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really dependent upon the black vote. And what this has done is put quote unquote black people in a very powerful position to make demands.
And do you think that this is well known? Does everybody who's black know that this power is there at this moment in time?
No.
Okay.
No. There is a divide of who knows, who doesn't know, who's possibly abstaining, who is gonna vote regardless, and that's what we're going to get into as we move throughout this episode. Because it's not a monolith, even though it's a voting block. It's not a monolith. So I know it's a weird thing, but
well, no, I mean, so people have different ideas, different opinions, but it's an active conversation.
Yes, but when we typically vote, we vote in a block for one party.
Okay.
So that's
it's called collusion. It's called collusion, Mo.
Yeah. So it's a very unique phenomenon, and I think our listeners are gonna be very advantaged by hearing us have this conversation.
Excellent.
Going into the 2020 election, because they're going to see, as they've seen from previous episodes, these things develop real time, and they were able to see what was going on as it was happening. So let's just get into number 2.
Number one is just there has been a slow but steady progression in that time, really, 40 plus years right now. You can point to 2 really kind of specific events. Number one came back in the 1980s. It was in the 1980s twice, in the 84 campaign and again in the 88 campaign, where Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, launched full-fledged national presidential campaigns in the Democratic primaries. And he said in 1984 that one of his goals in that campaign was to register millions of new black voters to get them voting in the Democratic primaries, and he did. You can see that in this data. And then you see it jump again about 20 years later, and that's when Barack Obama wins. When Barack Obama becomes president in 2008, and then through his presidency, you see this kind of sorting out of the 2 parties, white working class voters, blue collar white voters who had in the past maybe been Democrats. They've migrated more towards the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party, the role of black voters, the role of non-white voters in the Democratic Party increased from basically the moment that Obama became president there.
Wow. When did this air on NBC?
This was, I want to say, April, May.
Oh, okay.
Around April or May. So it was a little while ago.
Yeah, that's really
good. But it went under the radar.
Of course. Of course.
I mean, even for me, because when I went to go dig for clips, I was like, wow. I mean, he really broke down the numbers.
Yeah.
So what we really see here, we have a perfect storm happening here. We have the information age of the internet and really the smartphone, because that made information so much accessible, where you had people with laptops, desktops. People wouldn't really get on there to do a lot of searching, but now with social media and smartphones.
Obama was supposed to be the internet president, but he really wasn't. I mean, the internet, Twitter was around, but understanding how to use it and just the force that social media has become and how integrated it is with mainstream television, particularly cable news, which flows over into print. I mean, the machine has really built up, and so now it's a real thing. You can use it. It's being used. It's being abused, and it can also eat your face off.
Yeah, and a lot of information is being shared and unearthed. And then the second part of that storm was Barack Obama being elected in 2008, 2012. Black people felt very disenchanted from those 8 years because we didn't receive anything of substance or anything tangible from him being in office.
I want to stop you. The term tangibles, for people who are new, let's just explain that, because it's thrown around a lot. You said nothing tangible.
That's something that we can really see, feel, touch, point to say, okay, we saw progress happen. what we typically get from the Democratic Party is feel good stories, change, hope you can believe, change you can believe in, hope, that kind of
conversation.
Those, the conversations, the feel good. It was it's the feel good thing. So
there was in 8 years there was zero tangibles that Obama brought to Black America.
Zero. And as I said before, we only expected something from the last term because we were understanding of the wink, wink, nod, nod. You have to make it to the second term to really cut loose. When that didn't happen, as I say, very many people became disappointed. Then you factor in Hillary Clinton running against Donald Trump uttering the magical words to Black people of what do you have to lose? That made Black people look and say, what do we have to lose?
Right.
And from there, now it's about what do we have to gain? So that's where we're at right now. And it's a magical time if you're really into politics and to see a group of people who actually have this maturation politically.
There was a clip circulating on Twitter today from CBS. It was Face the Nation. What's the guy's name? Garrett something or other. And he's sitting there saying, for if you look at what he's done for Black Americans, what he's done for historically Black colleges, he had a list of a couple of things. He said that's accomplishments any president would want on his resume. And it was quite stunning to hear that on, CBS.
Yeah. For the things that Donald Trump has done for criminal justice.
Right, that was another one. Was also on the list.
How he's engaged with the HBCUs, because they were stiff-armed by Obama when he was in office. He actually took them for granted and didn't really entertain them at all. This is well known. Anybody can look it up. So, so when you have these things happening, and we talked about the masculinity portion of it.
Yeah. And yes, in fact, I don't want to stray too much, but I started watching Kevin Hart's series on Netflix. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard about it, and I do want to check it out.
I mean, there's some things I don't like, but I really do like this guy. And at a certain point, it's kind of a reality show. I mean, I completely understand how this is made, and I like a lot of the choices he's made. But he has this crew of guys that he kind of came up with and poor. And they talk openly about, how none of them had a dad and how they're their brotherhood and they got to watch out for each other. And you can just see that energy, and you can see how easily that is tapped into with a guy like Trump.
Yeah. So it's several things that Trump was recognized from this the masculine portion of it to Black men, that it's just, like I said, what a time to be alive.
Hell yeah. Hallelujah.
So
what a time to be a podcaster, Mo.
Let's get into part 3 of the next clip.
All there, as we head into 2020, I think you will see the story. There has been sort of that rising tide in the Democratic Party when it comes to the size, the clout, the power, the role of the Black vote in Democratic presidential primaries in 2020. It'll probably be more important than we have seen to date.
Okay, let me identify the dog whistle here was the rising tide that rises all boats, which I think is no longer believed.
And he just forced it in there because it was used out of context. So he just kind of shoehorned that one in there.
What was the point of that?
It was no point. It was just like, let's squeeze a meme in here.
Just trying to fill the time to hit the top of the hour. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
People, anybody out there that's listening and working for, near, or any political party, do not use the term rising tide. it falls flat. It does not work anymore. That was a 20th century meme. 21st century, it has the complete opposite effect.
I mean, it might come back, in another 10 years like bell bottoms, but we'll see.
So you asked a question about the divides and who's going to vote, who's not going to vote. So one of the divides we discussed numerous times in the show is between men and women. But the one that really hasn't been discussed is the age group and the difference between the black boomer vote and the black millennial vote.
Oh, okay. This is
so.
Hadn't even thought about it.
This is a real phenomenon, and let's get into our Democrats.
I need to say something honestly.
Yes.
I just realized that when I think of black Americans, I never really thought about black boomers and black millennials. It sounds horrible, but I'm just, it's like, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, of course. You got shitty millennials and you got stupid boomers, I guess.
And it's a real divide because just a little inside baseball before we get to the next clip. The millennials, and not all, but some of the millennials and some of the Gen Xers feel like the boomers did very little with the things that they were given or the opportunities they were given. They think they were sold a bill of goods because integration is not really seen as successful as you would think it would be. It's actually seen as somewhat as a detriment to some people in our a quote unquote community.
Wow.
So there is a huge divide there between the black millennial Gen Xer and the boomers.
Okay.
So black millennial won.
In 2016, millennial turnout increased for nearly every racial group except for black millennials. Pew Research found white, Asian, and Hispanic millennials turned out at higher rates than they did in 2012. Black millennial turnout, on the other hand, fell by nearly 5 points. That could present a problem for Democrats, many of whom view black millennials as the future of the party. In an Axios interview last weekend, the president of the racial justice group Color of Change raised concerns that Republicans are aiming to win support from a traditionally Democratic subset of voters. He said, quote, President Trump's campaign is handing out literature in black barbershops right now. They're doing micro-targeting on Facebook and have a digital strategy to engage black folks. The Democrats would serve themselves really well to understand in deep ways the power in intersectionality. Being specific and clear will help people understand you're not just talking around them or at them, but talking to them.
Okay. I'm looking at Color of Change now.
Mm-hmm.
Who runs this outfit?
That is one Mr. Van Jones.
Van Jones. Oh, that's who that is. Okay. I don't dislike him, actually. I don't dislike Van. He's entertaining, though. He's full of crap.
He's entertaining, but he's an opportunist. He's a major opportunist, but he sells himself as a radical and
poo. Right.
Change maker. You know, I mean, look at the name of the Color of Change. It's like, no, it's Color of Money, bro.
Well, can't blame him. It's kind of like the logo's cool. Yeah, he's got something going on there. Okay. All right. I'll have to invest. I'll put it in the show notes. I have to investigate that later. Nice.
So what we heard here is the black millennial numbers are down.
Yeah. What-ro?
We've seen the Black Lives Matter go after Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Right.
I think that was a crack in the dam.
That was the behind the stage conversation they had. That one you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
The one they made her acknowledge Black Lives Matter, and then they even, I think, they had a meeting with D-Ray and those guys.
Right. That's it. Right.
So you have it from a bunch of different angles. You have like the black super woke black millennials saying, "Hey, we want a progressive candidate." So now you can't run a run-of-the-mill Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Booker. Those guys won't get it. So they'll lean towards more of your Bernie Sanders, maybe Elizabeth Warren, but she has some issues with her saying she's Native American. That didn't really sit well with the wokes. So
is it also possible that all millennials in general are disengaging because they're so tired of the boring show?
That could be a possibility, but as the last clip we played said, all the other millennial numbers are up.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we have to trust those numbers then.
Yeah, we have to take them at face value, but that goes to show you. So,
okay, with that baseline, Houston, we have a problem.
We have a huge problem, and now we're starting to get to where that. So we went from 67 to 59.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to see where this 8% drop is coming from, and it's really the younger voters. So let's go into Black Millennial 2.
Arisha Hatch joins me now. She is the managing director of campaigns for Color of Change. Arisha, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So what should Democrats be doing in order to win the support of young Black voters?
Democrats can do a lot of things. I think in this election cycle specifically, Black voters and Black millennials want to hear Democratic candidates speaking explicitly to Black voters and explicitly about policy proposals and agendas that actually help to not only reduce mass incarceration and discriminatory policing, but also that are working to address the racial wealth gap that many of us face.
The racial wealth gap.
This is the whole point of reparations.
Here we go.
This is that's the politically safe way of saying reparations.
Huh. The racial
wealth gap.
Why haven't I not heard this?
So who's made this a big issue is the ADOS founders, Tone Talks, and Yvette Carnell.
Interesting, because the first hit on, and I do Google for this show, is an article from Forbes. The second is from the New York Times, and then an article from Duke, and then the Ford Foundation. This is an interesting little topic we got here. Okay. Good. Racial wealth gap.
The racial wealth gap. That might needs to be a whole nother show in itself because it's so fascinating. But that's the gap between the net wealth.
So it's not just Radical Mo, the podcaster, who's saying this stuff. It's the millennials. It's a lot deeper than we know, or it is surfaced.
It's very deep, but the Democrats have tried to push it down, and not acknowledge it because they know it's a huge problem for them. It's a major problem. Even the last speaker, she said they want. Now this is where intersectionality doesn't work because she said Black millennials want things targeted specifically for them.
Right. Whoops.
That's not that's not intersectionality.
No.
That's we want something. No rising tide, none of that bull crap. What are you going to trade me for my vote? It's an even exchange, and this is how politics works. That day is over. It's over. So the Democrats are going to have to come up with a new strategy, and I just don't think they have.
They better hurry up. It's running out of time.
And you have one Mr. Donald Trump. I'll say this before. I said it before. I say it again. We don't know what we're going to get out of a 2020 Donald Trump if he wins.
No.
He's not beholden to his base anymore. We've seen he's done things in the background, like criminal justice reform, things that you mentioned previously. So what would he really do to really change how he's perceived? And I'm not saying about any parties or anything, but I think he would do something to repair his image.
Huh.
I really do.
You think Trump could come up with a reparations gambit?
I think he could do something tangible. I wouldn't say go far as reparations, but if you can do anything tangible, which and
so I understand
how would that stone call what ripples in the political sphere?
It would cause an incredible brain freeze because he's racist. It makes no sense that the KKK, literally Hitler, does this.
Yes. And there was good people on both sides.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that.
No, fine people on both sides.
Fine people on both sides. So I think we left off at 2.
Yeah.
So let's go on to Black Millennials 3.
And will Color of Change be endorsing a presidential candidate this election cycle?
We're still undecided about whether to endorse a candidate. It's a very wide field. We fundamentally believe that any candidate that Democrats will select will be better than President Donald Trump. And so what we're doing is really focused on talking and engaging Black voters, Black millennial voters especially, many of whom are not even engaged by the candidates or the campaigns, trying to expand the Black electorate this cycle.
Oh, I see the problem. You just have to talk like this, and then that will appeal to the Black millennials.
So let me get this straight. So the candidates haven't engaged the voter, and you want to talk to the voter. How does that work?
I don't. I mean, first of all, who is she again? Where is she from? Oh yeah, the
She's
color
from
of
the
change. Color of change.
Yeah, Color of Change. She's their spokesperson.
She's just a word salad
but
lady.
I'm just saying, she is, but it's certain words she won't use, and that's a little foreshadowing in the next couple of clips. But I'll ask this question again, and people just think about this. Candidates are not engaging with the voter, and your target is to talk to the voter to say what? Be okay with not being engaged?
Exactly. Sounds like a strategy.
Think about that. She didn't say I'm going to talk to the candidates to help them engage the voters. No, we're going to target the voters.
Yeah.
That's a head scratcher. All right, so
there's money running around this operation. That's the head scratcher. That's what I like. How does that work? That's cool.
It's get them in line. It's what's the word? What is the word for this podcast when it comes to Black voting? Activate.
Oh, of course, activate. Yep, that's the one.
Activate them.
That's the one.
That's what she's talking about. Engage. She didn't use engage. She didn't use activate, but that's what I think she meant when she said engage them. You go activate the voter, not change the candidate, not talk to them about policies that could motivate the voter. You go activate the voter. So, Black Millennial 4.
Yeah, are there any candidates specifically so far that you think are actually doing a good job in connecting with young Black voters in particular?
Well, we've definitely seen strides made. In the last presidential election cycle, it was enough for a Democratic candidate just to say Black Lives Matter. What folks are really looking for this cycle is more depth, a plan and a policy agenda that actually moves beyond just criminal justice reform and addresses some of the economic justice concerns that we have. And so there are a number of candidates that we believe are taking that seriously. Mayor Pete with his Douglas plan, Senator Warren has been talking specifically about income inequality and problems with housing and gentrification that we think are very important to Black voters. Senator Booker, even Marianne Williamson on the Democratic National Debate stage has been really proposing solutions that Black folks want to hear.
Okay. I had not heard of the Douglas plan yet.
Yes, so that's Mayo Pete's.
That's very inside baseball, Mo.
Right. I want to make that clear. That's not from me. That is not from me. That's the Young Turks.
The Young Turks. Was it? It must have been a misspelling.
I think it's called. Isn't it the crawl or what is the thing called?
Yeah, the lower third. Lower third.
The lower third. They actually had, and I sent a screenshot to Adam for verification. They actually called the man Mayo Pete.
The R was a misspelling, we think.
No.
No.
Because they hate Pete over there.
That's pretty racist.
It's very, but I'm just showing you.
Hilarious, though.
Once again, liberals, they will use racist terms.
Yes, they
will. As I said before, they use the Kanye, and now they're attacking Pete with the Mayo Pete.
You know, we're recording this in the evening for the first time in the history of the show. I think we're a great late night show, Mo. We could be live coast to coast with this. This is hilarious. Let me read. Let me read Pete from Pete for America. This is the Douglas plan with the double S. The decisions we make in the next 4 years will determine America's path for the next 40. And a great deal of the progress we make on everything from increasing economic freedom to confronting climate disruption will depend on whether we tackle racial inequality in our lifetime. For all our country's forward movement, black people, capital B, in America are still disproportionately excluded from systems of social protection, economic uplift. Ooh, I think that's that comes close to the rising tide, and representative democracy while facing shorter lifespans, lower educational attainment, and dramatic overcriminalization and incarceration compared to their white counterparts. And so this plan is inspired on Frederick Douglass and comparable in scale to the Marshall Plan. Sounds like reparations to me.
Maybe. But the problem that Mayor Pete has, he's no good.
Well,
you
besides that.
Not for me, but you saw how they came after him over the, what was the article from the Root? MFer or I forgot the title. Yeah, I mean no. Pete's no good.
He's he's also known as Wall Street Pete. I mean, the guy definitely he's as far as I understand, he as a candidate has flown on more private aircraft than anyone else, and so he's not paying for it out of his own pocket. And
he's a Rhodes Scholar.
In addition, I think he's a spook. I think he's the CIA candidate. I really do.
Yeah, he's meeting in wine cellars. It's like, what are you doing, Pete? I mean,
that's what I mean. It's like, where's my invite, Pete?
Right.
Mayo.
So she brought up Marianne Williamson, and we talked about Miss Marianne on the show before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she said her solutions. That's an interesting word to say, solutions. I wonder what word you were avoiding to say. Black Millennial 5.
I'm curious on that last point because she was someone that did get quite a bit of attention when talking about the issue of reparations specifically. Is that what you're referencing when you talk about Marianne Williamson?
Nice.
Yes, we saw from the debate stage that a lot of the work that movements have done over the past several years have entered into the debate. And so, yes, black voters and black millennials especially are looking for candidates that speak explicitly to closing the black income gap, the black wealth gap. And so folks have been, at least in movement spaces, really excited to see that specific issue raised to a national profile this election.
When's the last time you were in one of the movement spaces?
And she really didn't want to say the R word.
No, of course not. She just said a whole bunch of stuff.
She rehearsed that solutions. Yeah, Marianne has solutions. I mean,
now Marianne Williamson, I don't know, is she still running? I don't think she's officially dropped out.
I don't know.
But yeah, I liked her. I liked a lot of what she said, and she didn't quite get there, but she put a number on the table. $400 million. At least
she used the word.
She used the word. But then then she was kind of like, and then we need a committee, and it's like, wow.
I give credit where credit's due. She did use the word unabashedly. Yeah. She pushed back against Don Lemon when he was like, "How do you calculate that number?"
But from a television and advertising executive standpoint, once she did the talking in tongues in the church, it was all over for her.
They could have used that for great ratings, though. Now that I think about it,
easily.
That would have spiced up
the show. I know.
Yeah.
Now, because they wanted to get rid of her so bad, in particular Fox News, which I don't understand why, because I think she's interesting. They were like, "Oh, it looks crazy," and then MSNBC, "Oh, what's going on here with Marianne? It's crazy. That bitch crazy." And that was it.
Yeah.
But
She's talking about reparations and giving cash. They was like, we got to get her out of here.
But you got to. But if you look
a bad look.
If you look at Survivor or Big Brother, you got to have one crazy one. You got to keep him around for a bit. You don't kick him off the island right away.
If you talking that crazy, you got to go.
Okay.
Because she was pulling them way to the dark side, pun intended.
Yes, true. True.
They were like, no, we're talking about
you can't be doing that. No.
No, we're gonna have a meeting for our meeting, that's what HR 40 was. We'll give them a meeting.
That's right.
About a meeting. But
whatever came out of that HR 40, weren't we supposed to have the next meeting? And where?
You tell me. Okay. You tell me, Adam. You tell me.
I don't know. Impeachment, Trump. That's all I know.
So now we're going to black voters are a central part of the Democratic primary. This is MSNBC, and this is from The Roots, Jason Johnson.
Well, Biden is comfortable. Biden is someone that people know. And also, and I've dug into a lot of these numbers myself, a lot of this is about age. Older black voters love them some Joe Biden because they're like, okay, he was with Barack Obama, and all we want is Trump out of office. The younger voters, millennials.
Is that how all older black people talk, Mo? I love me some Joe Biden. Isn't that literally a caricature this guy is doing?
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's MSNBC. They can do that. It's fine.
Like Fred Sanford all of a sudden. Okay. All right.
All we want is Trump out of office. The younger voters, millennials and Generation X like myself, often want something more, often don't think that Joe Biden is going to be transformative enough. And so the issue that he's going to have is sort of the reverse of Bernie Sanders in 2016. Bernie Sanders got young black voters, couldn't get anybody over the age of 30, right? Basically, Joe Biden's got to figure out a way to get younger African Americans to believe in him, to understand that he's made changes since the 1994 crime bill. And then he actually has to have a comprehensive on-the-ground plan, which very few people except for Cory Booker talked about, of how you're going to fight voter suppression. Because even if you've got black people supporting you, if they can't get to the polls or their votes don't count, you're not going to be successful. And that's something that I think if you've got 53% of African Americans saying we support you, you should try and find a way for them to actually get there and cast a vote.
Okay. Do we get to talk about this for a second, about the black voter suppression?
No, not really. Because to be honest with you, that's so low on the list.
I mean, it's really, is it a real thing, Mo? Because of a voter ID?
Driver's license, yes. You know, we as black folks, we have trouble getting driver license or IDs.
Is this true? That's not true.
No, that's not true. But that's the meme. That's the meme. Yeah, you know, they have problems getting IDs. It's like who it's so.
It's insulting. This is nuts.
It's so. This is what
hold on,
people are
stop.
hearing.
How come I never hear any black person say that's stupid? That's insulting.
Because they don't give us the mic. You're hearing it now. That you give me a $27 mic. Now you're hearing it.
And you know, but it sounds like a $30 mic.
It's the snowball killer.
Onward. Okay.
No,
just set it straight, because we know no one ever stops and mentions that and says, "What is this voter suppression?" And it's literally well, you know, it's hard for them to, you know, if you have voter ID laws, that's suppression. Like, okay.
Just for a little background, Mr. Jason, Jason Johnson. He was one of the he's from the Root, and he was one of the Russian botters.
Oh,
just to give you context, he was a Russian botter.
Okay, I got you.
So I mean, this is why you don't hear it. These people are, when you see them on MSNBC or NBC or whatever major outlet, they are towing the party line. They're
no kidding.
Go talk to the voter.
He's a professor.
Don't talk to the candidate.
He's a professor of political science.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But two clips ago.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, 2 clips ago. Go talk to the voter. Don't talk to the candidate. I mean, do we see what's going on here?
We do.
So yeah. So of the same ilk is this next lady. I didn't get her name. I think it's Donna.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you come to this question of younger voters who really think in terms of intersections. They don't just think about, sort of where's the guy who's been with the black guy. And I think that provides an opportunity for a lot of the other candidates to eat in there and turn that vote out. I mean, that vote basically didn't really show up in 2016, and this is a real opportunity. And the other thing is for Joe Biden, he's got to start looking at what he's doing and saying, what am I going to do to try to energize and galvanize this vote? But I look at some of these candidates who are putting out proposals that will be really appealing to those younger voters. And so I see that as an opportunity to grow.
And, when Donna says those voters stayed home in 2016, the consequences of staying home in 2016 was Donald Trump. And I think that this is, again, another indication of voters being realistic about the consequences of not using their vote properly.
And you know what? I have an idea, Joe. We'll attract the young black millennials by calling it the No Malarkey Tour. That'll work. that'll reel them in, Joe.
Joe has his Barrio Boomer dust. I mean, but he's struggling with the millennials.
No kidding.
It's clear. And Bernie Sanders, I mean, he has the black millennial vote. They love Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's a icon or this ideal candidate for what they believe in.
Well, I mean, he's promising a lot of free stuff. That's always good.
Yes. Free stuff always is a good thing.
But what about
Andrew, parties back?
Andrew Yang has got something really tangible. I mean, for everybody, $1,000 a month.
He has that math problem, sir.
Okay. I mean, how to pay for it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and they don't like Yang. I don't know why they don't like Yang. I really don't. I mean, he seems like a good candidate to get behind, but they want to push Biden.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, he's no good for the party. He's just no.
You don't think so?
No, I don't know. The party doesn't want him. No. He's sneaky. He's Silicon Valley sneaky. And
okay.
By sneaky, I mean he wants a value-added tax. And he says we can do half of what Europe is. Okay, Europe is 21% for everything you buy in the store, add 21% to that, and you're going to pay for that right then and there. He says, well, we can do with half. Yeah, I know. I remember when value-added tax was 12% in Europe. And then I remember when it was 15 and 17 and 18, then 18 and 19, and now 21. So no,
that's why
sneaky.
I love doing this show with you.
It's sneaky. It's sneaky. So no, that's not going to happen.
So he has the same problem that Elizabeth Warren has.
But she just at least he at least says it. And Elizabeth Warren, she's like, no, I'm not going to tell you about the tax part. Your cost will go down. She's telling you how to calculate your taxes. So now she blew it on that, I think.
So for the first portion of the show, I think we clearly identify why the black vote is so coveted and why it's so important to whoever the winner or loser is going to be in 2020. So we always have to go back.
Well, hold on. Can't we just call in Jay-Z and Beyonce? Can't they bring the black vote?
Didn't work in 2016. They had LeBron James, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Chance the Rapper, all at Hillary Clinton's I think 2 days before or a day before the election. No dice.
Well, John Legend. They didn't have John Legend.
John Legend's always on call. He's waiting for the call. He's like, you call me? He's checking his phone. You call me?
Hello? Was I needed?
Yeah. So, I mean, they have everybody, but the younger voters are smarter. And it's transactional now.
Right.
And you can't come with wooden nickels anymore. And these promises of rainbows and glitter and all this. Yeah. You don't understand what I'm saying, but sure. Like the warm fuzzies. Oh yeah, you're gonna feel great after you vote for it. What are you putting on the table?
Right.
Not only are the millennials asking that, a good portion of the black male vote is asking the same thing. What are you going to put on the table? So now, this is why we had the conversation on previous shows, who they're targeting.
Women.
Women. Because they can say, this is a first for you. We can have a first black woman. We can have a first black woman, female vice president, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's still a first there. After Barack Obama, like, there's no more,
And I think it's pretty well established that the general thinking within the Democrat Party is whatever white guy is nominated, it's going to be Stacey Abrams, who is vice president candidate.
It has to be.
That's pretty universally known, yeah.
So now we have to go back and talk about the history of voting rights, and this is according to the New York Times.
In this scene from the 2012 movie, Abraham Lincoln spells out the terms of Reconstruction.
All they heard was the first time any president has ever made mention of Negro voting.
In 1865, he said freed slaves who were intelligent or had served as soldiers should be allowed to vote. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, guaranteed this right as part of the full citizenship accorded to African American men. But for much of the 20th century, voting remained a contentious issue. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, gave women the right to vote, but the racial divide remained.
I love that you pull these clips. That's great.
So what I'm setting up here is why the boomers feel it's an obligation to vote, because they're closer connected to history.
To the historical struggle, of course.
Yeah, they actually, 60s, they were there, where the millennials don't have that context. And it's like, I wasn't there. I've always had the right to vote, so I'm going to be more selective with my callous and more selective with my vote. Whereas the boomers say you have to vote. You have to vote. I mean, and this is not something I read in a book somewhere.
This is a critical thing to understand, because this is only just before I was born. No, just as I was born. Really, when a lot of these things came into play. But even if you go back 2 generations, you're so right. Black Americans have not had this right, and it's fresh.
Just a personal anecdote. If you think about it, my dad, right? He was born in 51, so like he was able to vote in the very end of the 60s. His dad may have been heckled, or it was a struggle for him to vote.
Right.
So when they had that conversation between those two, it's like, yes, from my grandfather to my father, son, you have to vote because we just got this right. You had to keep the ball rolling. And whereas the conversation, say, between me and my dad, he's always pretty much had the right to vote. I've always had the right to vote. So now it's about, what are we going to get for our vote? What are you going to do with it?
Right, exactly.
And what are we willing to do if our demands aren't met? And it's hard for my dad to say, no, I won't vote.
I understand that. That makes total sense.
So this is why Joe Biden's boomer numbers, I say boomer, you're saying tongue in cheek, but this is why his numbers are so high with that black age group.
Yeah.
And this is why they're struggling with the black millennial. But let's get into the history of the voting rights too.
Some states continue to limit voting, either through measures like the poll tax or direct intimidation of African American voters. In the South, there were even whites-only primaries. This is Sam Tannenhouse of the New York Times. The first modern Civil Rights Act was signed by President Eisenhower in 1957. It created a federal commission authorized to enforce voting rights. Senator Strom Thurmond conducted the longest filibuster in history, more than 24 hours, in an effort to thwart the bill. But it passed.
The location for the meeting with Senator Rubio.
Still, voting was not equal for all. Massive resistance in the Deep South was organized to keep blacks from the polls, and legal enforcement was hampered by all-white jury.
This is why I get so irked about modern day voter suppression, quote unquote voter suppression.
Right.
When people of my grandfather's age could have been beaten, even their lives taken for going to vote. They were made to pay poll taxes. They were made to take literacy tests. Even things as asinine as how many like jelly beans are in the drawer kind of things. So when you say modern day voter suppression, it's like, when you equate those two things, it's so disrespectful.
Yeah,
to the older black voters.
Yes, and to think that one or two generations after that would care so little that they can't even figure out how to get an ID card.
Yeah, or to check to make sure you're still on the roll. I mean, if we're saying
Right.
this right is so important to us,
Right.
going down to where City Hall and make sure you're on the rolls and getting your ID and make sure, of course, we know gerrymander happens and they play with the voter rolls on both sides. I mean, this happens.
Yeah.
But if you say voting is so important to you as a right, just doing those small checks to make sure you have that right to exercise it, even if you write yourself in, whatever, you would think you would take it more seriously. But these people come along and say, oh, yeah, it's voter suppression. Dude, that is so, it's just a smack in the face to the people 2-3 generations ago that really, whose vote was suppressed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that irks me. And that's why I didn't address the voter suppression thing until I got further
Right.
down
Well, it's one of those things that people just talk about. Just like, when you say voter suppression, it's like saying comprehensive immigration reform. It's meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Common sense gun laws. I can go on forever. It's like it's meaningless. It's completely meaningless.
But it's said to invoke a certain mind picture.
Of course.
Of white cops standing there, blocking the polls.
Right. How many jelly beans?
Right. Exactly. that was real. I mean, like, read this. That's not what happened now. But then when they equate the two, it irks.
It's irksome. I got you.
It's a pet. It's a pet peeve of mine.
I will continue to call this out when I see it.
Please do. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
History of the voting rights, part 3.
Voting rights became a central issue in the civil rights movement.
I think this march will go down as one of the greatest.
In 1965, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. led the march from Selma to Montgomery for better voting laws. The nation was shocked by images of the marchers being attacked. And less than 5 months later, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It barred states and districts from curtailing the vote on the basis of race, color, or language.
It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Sections 4 and 5 of the bill included special provisions to ensure fair voting practices in a number of states, most of them in the South. Voting rights advocates say some citizens there continue to be disenfranchised. But the Supreme Court's close ruling on Tuesday, striking down Section 4, suggests that conditions have changed since 1965, and it is left to Congress to reconsider the act.
Yep.
There it is again.
Yep.
Voters' rights still disenfranchised. So this goes from the history of the voting rights, and the end of that last clip starts to bleed over to explain why the majority of black voters are Democrats.
You actually probably have to go back over a century to begin telling the story, right? African Americans start out when they become essentially enfranchised. they do so because of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and therefore African Americans sort of by default become Republicans because that is the party of emancipation. The Republican Party, while it's in favor of emancipation, is not really a natural place to put African Americans, especially as the Republican Party goes through the late 1800s and early 1900s and goes through some sort of realignments inside itself and turns away from a possible progressive move with Theodore Roosevelt and becomes increasingly in the early 20th century more the party of white-collar business interest, upper-class interest.
Well, that's one way to explain it.
Quick question, sir. Did you hear me ring my bell? Yeah, I heard you laugh a little bit in the background.
Yeah.
Why do you think I rang my bell? I mean, I just want to...
It starts off with the church. It starts off with the church right away.
It's the same exact song. These are two different news organizations.
Yeah.
The first set of 3 clips was the New York Times. This clip is a set of clips from Newsy. And they all use the same song.
Which song is it, though?
We shall overcome. Yes.
It's
like a mind control trigger. I mean, I'm being really serious.
No,
here.
I hear you because it immediately caught me. I heard it. I heard you ring the bell, and I didn't even hear what song it was. I'm like, oh, I get it. I know where I am.
It's like a portal to take you back to the civil rights time.
They need to they need to throw an Amazing Grace in there too, though, once in a while.
Well, no, it's the we shall overcome. That's the meme. That's the
we shall. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, the New York Times used the same exact song, so they're aware of what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
To trigger these emotions, and that's what they want. They want emotional votes. They don't want educated votes. They want emotional votes. But
this is political campaigning in general is always playing at the emotions. I mean,
of course,
and
of course,
and we vote for our politicians just like we buy our washing powder. As long as the message is repeated a lot, then we get into it.
I agree with that. So majority 2.
But now you get African Americans moving into the North where they can vote, and they begin to find the appeal of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal very attractive. They begin increasingly to identify with the Democratic Party. Doesn't happen overnight, right? Partisan attachments take a while to erode during the late 30s and early 40s and late 40s to turn from a party that had been held hostage to states' rights in the South to one that was willing to embrace civil rights. You see that in the behavior of Harry S. Truman, right, who's going to integrate the armed services by executive order after World War II. You see that in the 1948 Democratic Convention. Then Senator Hubert Humphrey from Minnesota gets up and says, it's time for us to walk out of the shadow of states' rights into the bright sunshine of civil rights. At the same time, the Republican Party is struggling with its history of emancipation and civil rights. You get someone like Dwight Eisenhower, who says that integration, desegregation should go slow.
Okay, that was 48?
Yeah. So there's 2 things that they attributed to, as of right now, pre-civil rights that made blacks majority Democrats. One being the New Deal, FDR's New Deal,
right,
and then the integration of the armed services during World War II.
Got it.
Those are the 2 things pre-Civil War. So, and then they say with the Eisenhower, he said that integration needs to go slow.
Yeah.
Which I've discussed this before on my show. I am not a fan of forced integration in governmental or schools or things of that nature.
I think historically this turned out not to be a super great idea.
No, and I just to speak personally, my dad had to leave an all-black school in his senior year and was forced to go to integrated school. And he hated it.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah, so forced. And just not taking up for Eisenhower, I'm just saying I think that's a more popular belief or more popular sentiment than people want to let on when you use 2020 hindsight vision.
Yeah, well, we learned a bit about that in regards to Kamala Harris bringing that up against Joe Biden. So I think people are a lot more aware than they were.
Yeah, and this is one of the benefits of the information age that we previously talked about at the beginning of the show. So majority 3.
That sort of personifies some of this movement of the Republican Party away from its traditional belief in civil rights and extending rights to African Americans. Especially by the mid-1960s, you get Lyndon Johnson, who's going to take the lead on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And by that point, the ship is cooked, right? The Republican Party opposes it. Its standard bearer, Barry Goldwater, opposes it in 1964. He calls it a piece of communistic legislation. At that point, I think the door closes, right? At that point, African Americans who are politically active are Democrats.
The switch.
Yeah.
The switching parties.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I've never heard it explained like this, so I'm kind of trying to process it, because this is the whole, what happened? Well, you hear, how this switch happened. Who switched? Was it the voters who left, or did the party switch? It's this very murky way it's explained. I've heard it explained many different ways. Not exactly like this, though.
Well, this is the left Democratic explanation.
Sure.
For why black voters vote Democrat, and they didn't use the term Southern strategy, but as you always know, I always like to counterbalance any narrative with a narrative or at least an explanation from the opposite side. So then we can go down the middle and kind of find where the truth really is.
Right.
So I went over to PragerU.
That's a go-to source.
One of our,
that's a go-to.
Yeah, one of our right-leaning go-to sources. And Miss Carol Swain. Miss Carol Swain, let me look up her information here, is a
professor.
She is a professor of political science at Vanderbilt University, and she's a black lady. So, just hold that into thought as we get her to explain the Southern strategy.
Once upon a time, every student of history, and that meant pretty much everyone with a high school education, knew this. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and the Republican Party was the party of emancipation and racial integration. Democrats were the Confederacy, and Republicans were the Union. Jim Crow Democrats were dominant in the South, and socially tolerant Republicans were dominant in the North. But then, in the 1960s and 70s, everything supposedly flipped. Suddenly, the Republicans became the racists, and the Democrats became the champions of civil rights. Fabricated by left-leaning academic elites and journalists, the story went like this. Republicans couldn't win a national election by appealing to the better nature of the country. They could only win by appealing to the worst. Attributed to Richard Nixon, the media's all-purpose bad guy, this came to be known as the Southern strategy.
Sometimes I think, because it's just not clearly laid out how this happened. I think that when they killed Kennedy, the trauma was so great that there's like a collective memory hole kind of around that period. And then with Johnson and everything, it's just like, I'm like, okay, here we are. This is how it is. Dust is cleared. We're the Democrats. We're your friends.
And they rewrote Johnson in history from who he actually was when I think several of our listeners, and maybe you have heard the Johnson tapes.
Oh, yeah.
He was not this
super racist. The guy's a super racist. He was saying horrible shit.
He wasn't this civil rights freedom fighter that they paint him out to be, especially in this HBO movie they made.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they made him out to be like
a douche. It was a total dick.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is, as you pointed out, they brushed over this thing called a Southern strategy, and it's just widely accepted as truth. Well, Miss Carol Swain, she's going to break down the myth or myths of the Southern strategy.
It was very simple. Win elections by winning the South. And to win the South, appeal to racists. So the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, were to now be labeled the party of rednecks. But this story of the two parties switching identities is a myth. In fact, it's three myths wrapped into one false narrative. Let's take a brief look at each myth in turn. Myth number one. In order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact, Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928 when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith.
Yes. I think I've seen this whole Carol Swain bit. I think it's very familiar to me. So, yeah, this sounds right. And I remember looking this up in reliable places like Wikipedia and confirming that it was right.
But this goes to show you that there's a counter narrative to what was widely accepted.
Of course.
And this goes to explain why millennials, some not being woke, some actually being more conservative.
Yeah.
This is more ammunition for people to say, hey, wait a minute. When I'm talking to my dad, I mean, we're going to use this analogy of me talking to my dad because I think I'm a borderline millennial and Gen Xer. I'm not sure where the cutoff is, but I'm not a boomer, but I'm a non-boomer. My dad's a boomer. So when we have these conversations, I'm like, hey, Dad. And he'll break out the Southern strategy.
Right.
And I'll be like, I'll top your Southern strategy with Miss Carol Swain, a black Southern lady that's a boomer. So, I mean, it works out. It works out great because now I have this information to, enlighten him.
How'd that go over, Mo?
How's
that go over when you do that to your dad? That must work out great.
Yeah. Well, he's going to vote regardless. So, I mean,
I know.
He's going to vote. So, So, that's, once again, this is why Biden's numbers are so strong because they don't want to hear it. This is what we've done.
Exactly.
This is what we've done, and this is what we're going to do. But for people out there, we're going to break down the myths for you, and let's go into myth number two.
Myth number two. Southern Democrats, angry with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, switched parties. Fact, of the 21 Democratic senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act, just one became a Republican. The other 20 continued to be elected as Democrats or were replaced by other Democrats. On average, those 20 seats didn't go Republican for another 2.5 decades.
Yep. Yeah, I have seen this. And she has a graphic with that. It makes it even clearer when you see it.
Yeah, it's undeniable. Yeah. So how does that work out? Where was this swap? Where was this flip?
It didn't
exist.
It's in the book, man. Shh.
It didn't exist. But we all know when you say something long enough, it'll just be accepted as truth. And it's kind of hard to break the condition.
And it's really astounding because I know that I went after this story for about a month or 6 weeks on No Agenda. And, and I got so many different versions of the switch that people had heard and confirmation that, because I played pieces of this PragerU bit. And like, that's what I heard. But now that I hear this, it's something completely different. This is snuck into history, and it's a rewrite. It really has been rewritten in different ways, but the result is the same: a switch.
But she's using cold, hard numbers. You can't beat numbers, but people would just write it off. Like, whatever. She's compromised.
Conspiracy theory, crazy religious, Republican, Trump.
All the above. She's lost her mind.
Yeah.
All right, but let's just for poops and giggles, let's listen to Miss Carol Swain and the third myth.
Myth number 3. Since the implementation of the Southern strategy, the Republicans have dominated the South. Fact, Richard Nixon, the man who is often credited with creating the Southern strategy, lost the Deep South in 1968. In contrast, Democrat Jimmy Carter nearly swept the region in 1976, 12 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in 1992, over 28 years later, Democrat Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The truth is, Republicans didn't hold a majority of Southern congressional seats until 1994, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Well, that's the facts, but I mean, as we know,
matters not.
But it's our due to have our due diligence. We have to counterbalance the narrative, and there you have it. And anybody that wants to use this information at any family function, have at it. Godspeed.
Yes, we feel that weddings are very appropriate for this. This is a good time to break it out. You just have a headphone. Hey, listen to these guys, and just cue up that bit. It'll fantastic, guaranteed fun.
So, but at the time that this was going on, there was somebody calling this hypocrisy out. And it was one of my favorites, Mr. Malcolm X, and one of the greatest speeches, even over, this is my personal opinion, even over I Have a Dream. And this was the ballot and the bullet speech. Ballot or the bullet speech.
The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community and get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray, those days are long gone.
Oh, really? They came back for a bit there.
Doesn't it sound eerily like the times we're in right now?
No kidding. No kidding, Mo. And this is, what year was this? This speech?
1964.
64.
This is when, after he left, let me get the information on this speech. This was after he left the Nation of Islam in 1964, April 12th. He gave this speech at the King Solomon Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. But he even basically pointed out the boule.
Oh, yeah.
In there, because he said for the people to even have their eyes open, they're going to send leaders that look like us to get your vote. So, I mean,
hello, Barry.
It was quite clear. Yeah, it was quite clear that even real time people were aware of
what was going on.
Right, of what was going on. That's why I followed up this Miss Carol Swain with this set of clips, because people are like, oh, that's a rewrite of history and she's cherry picking history. Well, we have one of the most renowned black leaders refuting
it. Yes.
So let's let him continue. Ballot or the bullet too.
We must understand the politics of our community, and we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart.
It's scary.
It's
if you were to publish these words right now in 2020, it's like he's
talking.
We're
now.
at the same
right.
We're at the same crossroads.
Well, it's a fractal, and in a very interesting, nice way, you are a part of that fractal, Mo. So this is a good thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to see, really.
Because I knew of this speech. I mean, I've heard it numerous times, but just to hear it and like now to hear it right now,
yeah,
it's like
uncanny.
he could be talking about what's going on right now, and it's wonderful at one way, and another way is just that wow, it took this long.
It's like because this is 55 years because I was born in 1964.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I'm part of the fractal too. Ooh.
It took 55 years for us to get to the maturing point.
Yeah. Congratulations, Mo Fax. How does it feel now that you're politically mature?
It feels great. It feels great, with a team effort.
Exactly.
But it does feel great because what we see here is the internet.
Yep.
The one of the greatest inventions of all time. The internet has defeated the propaganda machine that has kept down people in all walks of life. And all we can go back and pull data and pull clips and put it together and actually find what the truth was. So I'm just gonna let him continue. I mean, he's a roll right now. So
come on down, Martin.
So this government has failed us. The government itself has failed us. And the white liberals who have been posing as our friends have failed us. And once we see that all these other sources to which we've turned have failed, we stop turning to them and turn to ourselves. We need a self-help program. Do it yourself philosophy. Do it right now philosophy. It's already too late philosophy. This is what you and I need to get with. And the only way we're going to solve our problem is with a self-help program. Before we can get a self-help program started, we have to have a self-help philosophy.
I'm so happy that this particular recording exists because a lot of the recordings of Martin Luther King suck. And this is nice. I mean, the audio's good. I mean, of course, it's got its scratchiness, but you can really hear him incredibly well. And again, everything he said here. I mean, it might as well call himself Malcolm Mo Fax.
And the funny thing is that's the meme that I was telling you about before that I've seen conservatives post of Malcolm X talking about liberals.
Right.
I've mentioned it several times on the show, but that is the one.
But also, doesn't he say in this speech where he says the conservative doesn't give a crap about you anyway? Either.
Yeah, he does say that, but hey, no, we're just gonna clip it down to where he's talking about the liberals.
Oh, okay.
That's how memes work. I mean, come on.
Gotcha. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you.
We're gonna cherry pick what we can use. Yeah, to use against the liberals.
Of course.
I mean, but it's weird because I was like, what? Hardcore conservatives are using Malcolm X. Who would thought that? And in the 21st century. Wow.
When I was growing up, there used to be Malcolm X T-shirts. You don't see those anymore.
Oh, I will say this, and I don't want to get too far off because I know what I'm saying. It has been disgusting what a few members of the Black academia has done to the name of Malcolm X. One being Mr. Michael Eric Dyson. Mm-hmm. Disgusting. And I'll just leave it at that. You know what I'm saying? People can go look up for themselves. When you are the boule, everything is fair game to tear down if it's harmful to the people that you're protecting. Now, and I'll just leave it at there, but it's just disgusting.
Well, we're bookmarking it because in 2020 we got to come back to that.
Yes, I will come back to that. I will, and maybe sooner than thought. But I think we left off at 3. Let's get into
4. Yep,
4.
Why does this loom to be such an explosive political year? Because this is the year of politics. This is the year when all of the white politicians are going to come into the Negro community. You never see them until election time. You can't blame them until election time. They're going to come in with false promises. And as they make these false promises, they're going to feed our frustrations. And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American, and got sense enough to know it.
Now, what did he say at the end there?
Not American.
I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I'm not American.
Democrat, American, and have sense enough to know it. And what he means by that is he's not recognized.
No, I totally understand what he means.
I'm explaining for people that, you know.
I'm sorry, we'll say it again because I interrupted you.
Yeah. No, what he's not accepted into the American dream, into the fabric of the Constitution. So he's like, and what you have to do is put that in context of
course,
Dr. King and I Have a Dream and the, civil rights movement. He's like, no, don't be fooled.
Right.
To think you're only being used because you can activate the vote. Even back then, it was it was about activating the vote.
Yeah.
So bullet 5.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power.
Here's what Trump should do if I was advising him. Use that line. You want to be in the White House, you want to be in the doghouse. What a great one that would be to resurrect.
This is the block.
Yeah, of course. This is
don't vote.
Right, it's the origination of the block. Sure.
We have so much power right now because the country is so evenly divided that this is one time where the monolith of the block, or whatever you want to call it, is valuable. Because if we can move in one direction or the other,
it'll be noticed. That's
the way the country goes. Yeah. However our vote goes I'm talking about 2020 here. However our vote goes or don't go, because we have to talk about the negative vote again. Republicans just need us to stay at home. They don't need us to come and vote. And to go back a few clips ago, they were saying that the Trump campaign is putting out targeted information on Facebook and in barbershops. This message is getting around.
So wait a minute. So Trump is campaigning with flyers in barbershops? Is that what you said?
I don't know how that goes. I haven't seen a Trump flyer in a barbershop, but
they're reaching out.
Right. Because that's the political form, one of the major political forms in the black community.
Oh, it's the barbershop. Yeah.
It's the barbershop. I mean, any community, but more
Mo,
so.
I've seen Eddie Murphy movies, okay?
Yeah.
I get it.
If mama named him Clay, I'll call him Clay.
I could be your Arsenio.
All right. So, people, don't think about 1964 when you hear these clips.
Think about right now.
Think about 2020.
Yeah.
Think about right now and what he's saying. And Bullet 6.
You're the one who sent Kennedy to Washington. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first, and they put you last. Because you're a chump.
A chump. Fantastic. And
now,
again,
this could
spot
be,
on. Spot on.
But this could be about 2008 to 2010.
Yep.
When we got Barack in office, gave him all the votes he needed to pass any legislation from those 2-year period. They got everything, Obamacare and everything else they want passed, but nothing.
No. Trump.
But nothing. Trumps.
You got Trump. And next you got Trump. See, you got this again. I'm writing the campaigns for him.
Somebody call Mr. Adam Curry and the Curry political
consultancy.
Consulting.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to counter Mr. Malcolm and explain how some people that I often agree with, I don't agree with on their stance on voting, is Mr. One Neely Fuller. And we've played his clips before. He was so gracious to us to define what white supremacy was on previous shows.
Yep.
But I want him to explain, he's going to explain voting with the slave ship analogy.
It leads to some constructive things and a whole lot of non-constructive things. But when you consider the alternative, I use the slave ship analogy. If you're at the bottom of the slave ship, you know you're on a slave ship. But every now and then, some second lieutenant who is the slave master of the slave ship, some person who is not the captain maybe, comes down the ladder and say, well, the captain doesn't speak favorably of any of you people. After all, this is a slave ship. But I argue with him about giving you a little more cornbread than you usually get. So I'm going to try to get it for you. I mean, if you'll just bear with me and try to cooperate and don't rally your chains too much down here, disturbing my sleep. So if you ought to just kind of keep quiet, I'll see to it that your rations are increased.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And this is why I have the utmost respect for Neely Fuller, but this is why I disagree. He's in the mindset, well, a little bit more cornbread is better than the little piece of cornbread that we did have.
Right. But he's also a boomer, so he
is
different mindset.
He is, but I'd rather keep his analogy, keep rattling my chains.
Yeah, he's got some good ones in there.
Right. I'd rather me personally keep rattling my chains than to be bought off for another little few more crumbs. Because I understand the power that was laid out in the clips by Malcolm X.
Right.
There's real power, political power there. It's just that that's the best, have never realized it.
And that's the best enslavement is when in general, all Americans collectively, we have incredible power. We are much more powerful than the government. But
we do.
But when you don't know it, when you've been taught not to think that way, when you're told that the people you elect are your leaders, that's one of my personal peeves. Like, come on, they're not my leader. It's my employee. But that's been programmed for years and years and years. Thank God for podcasting.
All right, so we've talked about why black people have voted Democrat for the Democrats. To close out, I want to talk about why black people have not voted for the Republicans. And to do that, I want to use one of our show favorites, Mr. Stephen A. Smith.
Stephen A. said that every black person in America should vote Republican for at least one election. Stephen A. Smith is joining me now. Stephen, who are you trying to send a message to? Republicans, Democrats, African Americans, all of the above?
I'd go with all of the above. That sounds about right. But specifically the Democratic Party, from the standpoint that I definitely believe that the black vote has been taken for granted. And primarily the black community is at fault, in my estimation, in that regard, simply because on one hand, we're giving one party our vote because they've successfully gone about the business of convincing our community that the other party, the Republican Party, is completely against the interest of the black community. And as a result, we've been very transparent in our support. We've boarded hook, line, and sinker. We look at the Republican Party. I'm not talking about every single one of us, of course, but vast majority of black Americans look at the Republican Party as the enemy. We look at the Democratic Party, even tacitly, as our support base. And as a result, we are very transparent in our support for them. So because of it, they have a license to take us for granted. The Republican Party has a license to summarily dismiss us because they believe they'll never get our vote anyway. And then we end up finding ourselves devoid of any kind of representation whatsoever because nobody is really competing to garner our vote and our support.
Well, that is very clear.
I thought he laid it out quite clear. Yes. Why we vote democratically or for the Democrats and why we don't vote for Republicans. I couldn't have said it any better myself. But of course, he had to go back and had to recant his statements because
excuse me, got a little meeting over here in the corner office. I'd like to talk to you about what you said there on the show. Mm-hmm.
Stephen A., can we talk to you in the office for a minute? You know that, and what he really wanted to say was, don't vote. I think, but you had to vote. But they got to keep you voting. I think not voting is even saying to vote for the other party.
Let me tell you,
is less dangerous.
You could not go on a mainstream television program and say, I recommend people not vote. Immediately, everyone will be uber patriot. How can you say that? This is the worst thing in the world. No one could say it. Nobody can say that on mainstream television ever.
And let's not forget that got Mr. Kaepernick canceled.
That's right.
Temporarily.
There you go.
By Mr. Stephen A. Smith. So I mean, yeah, so he was like, okay, we need to go the other direction. But then he had to come in and remind everybody that he was a black man.
Oh, okay.
After that, so
good. Thank God, I forgot. Yeah,
you idiots. So, to close out the show, I have some clips from a YouTube channel called Black Public Media.
Mm-hmm.
And the video was entitled "Black Folks Don't Vote Republican."
At one point, black folks did vote Republican.
People like Zora Neale Hurston, for instance.
At the time of the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln was Republican.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt ushered in shifts around how black people voted from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party.
And then the father of the Tea Party came along, it was Barry Goldwater, and presented this whole extreme conservatism idea. And I think it sort of steered us away.
Also, the Republican community has done a poor job of reaching out to the black community and helping us understand their values as they have progressed over time. So we're just kind of used to voting. Mom was Democrat, Dad was Democrat. I'm Democrat.
I'm a Democrat. They talk about the middle class, or they don't ask you to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. when you don't have boots.
Democrats we want to share the wealth. Republicans are like, no, it's mine. I work for this shit. This is mine.
Oh, how old are these fine people?
It was at various different ages, but most of them were maybe mid-30s to late 40s. But one person said in that video, Mom's a Democrat, Dad's a Democrat.
I'm a Democrat.
I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
All right, so, and they even acknowledged that black folks started voting Republican.
Yeah.
But that you could hear, it didn't explicitly say it, but you could hear the Southern strategy mentality kicked in.
Oh, yeah, it's in there for sure.
It was in there. I mean, they were just, something happened. This miraculous switch happened.
I'm telling you, Kennedy assassination, memory hole.
That's a fascinating observation. But and I liken that to maybe 9/11 the same way. Trauma, of course. Yeah, the trauma. Everything else is a blur after that. I mean, because you can't even remember
a lot of stuff.
You think it in TV clips.
Exactly.
But when you actually try to remember it, it's really a blur. So the final clip, we have black folks don't vote Republican too.
Black folks don't vote Republican. For the large part, probably not in droves.
I thankfully don't have any friends or family members that would vote Republican that I know of. If they are, they're closeted Republicans.
I honestly feel like there's a secret society of black Republican voters somewhere. I don't know who they are. They're not. There's like one in my family. I won't put her out there on Front Street like that. But
I think about the Ben Carsons of the world, the Michael Steeles of the world. What I've accepted is that any idea that comes out that's created by human beings, we're always going to find someone to believe in it.
Now the black people that vote Republican tend to be a little cray-cray.
Black folk don't vote Republican because we don't trust Whitey.
Okay, well, that's pretty clear then. The programming is working, Mo.
The programming is...
It's successful.
They're closeted.
Yeah. Oh,
Could you imagine to say, because I vote a political way?
You're closeted, man.
And the time we live in where everybody's accepted,
intersectionality,
kumbaya,
yep, share,
but
we'll
you
share.
have to be cray-cray.
Yeah.
You have to be cray-cray to vote Republican.
And I'm not calling her out.
Right, exactly. I'm not going to out him. Not going to out him out of the closet for being Republican. And that, to summarize,
well,
either you have to vote.
Yeah,
if you have to vote.
Let me just tell you something from Cracker Nation over here. I was at the hair salon. That is, believe it or not, Mo, political conversation takes place in the hair salon, just like the barbershop, except my hair salon is filled with women. And and I now the woman who does my hair, we talk politics. We're not on the same page, but we both agreed. She sees the show. So a woman next to us overhears it without really being prompted. She just steps and she says, "Oh my God, let me just tell you, I don't know where you stand politically, but one of my clients, he said, if I had stage 4 cancer, I'd get a gun and go kill the motherfucker." So this kind of idiocy is everywhere, across all lines and boundaries. In barbershops.
And it's making people sick. And it's making people
very sick. Very,
it's
very
making
sick.
people sick. And I'll make this my last statement. We lost Elijah Cummings a few months ago, a month ago, and we heard the tragic news.
Yes.
About his name slips my mind now.
He has pancreatic
Elijah
cancer.
Cummings, doppelganger. What's his name?
Oh, you shouldn't have done this to me.
Lewis. John Lewis.
Damn.
So
it was only at Selma. You don't have to remember that. It's not important.
Yeah. But I want to point out that people are getting sick.
Exactly. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Just let that sink in. 2 congressmen that have been heavy anti-Trumpers have
calling him a racist.
One's dead, and the other one has a severe illness. And how many other media people have been announced sick in the last 3 years?
This is so interesting. I've been talking about this being unhealthy for so long, and you just brought it up again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we are now into year 4 of this, and I think I identified it early on. Certainly, people who hate Trump, no matter what their political affiliation, they started swearing and cussing more on TV and radio and podcasts. And it's popping out, and it's like, ooh, and it's become a little more okay. And I always saw that as incredible. If you can't hold that back in a situation where it's not appropriate on this show, it's appropriate. You know, we don't overuse anything. But on television, cable news, it's not appropriate. And when you can't hold that in, then you've got stuff rooted very deeply. And when you hold that in, and you're holding that for years, I think you and I'm going to keep track of this. People are going to start dropping. It's these old guys first. And you
can see the young ones aging. Yes. You can see them aging right before your eyes. And the reason why I bring this up is the V for V, the value for value. Even if you think we're 2 idiots that's babbling along, what we try to do is this. We laugh. You know, we want to talk people down off the ledge, while providing some educational value. So if you don't take anything away from the show but to laugh about the things that we talk about, or to, just to have a little fun for a couple hours, that's the value that I hope that we provide, if nothing else, if you don't take anything else away from the show.
And what we'd like to ask for in return is that you consider returning some of that value. It's actually a very simple exercise. It's like, so you've been listening to this for about an hour and a half, a little bit longer. What is your time worth? If you go see a movie, we're about the length of a movie. Did you come away from this learning something and you still laughed? Please consider us at mofundme.com, moefundme.com. Mofax.com is our main website. And Mo, I think you've set everybody up for a perfect 2020. I'd like to ask you one question before we go. Having having gone through this journey with you, do you think this is the year that the bloc, regardless of what happens, the black bloc, B2, B squared, realizes what power it has? Is this realization going to be mainstream enough?
I think it only takes a certain percentage, and then the rest of the block will follow. So the way I say that is, if you can get 20, 25% to realize it, then the rest will go along. And and I think we're reaching that nexus point because you're hearing the different groups have these conversations. You're hearing it come from the conservative side, the super woke millennial side of the I'm not going to vote unless I get something tangible side, which I'm a part of. Mm-hmm. We're all coming to the same point from different angles. And I think once we get there and we see the results of it, somebody's going to have to come talk to us.
Yeah, and I think for me, it'll be interesting to see not whether you'll see a block vote for Democrats or withheld vote. I think we may even see withheld vote or something goes to Trump. I think that's where it may be. Because
if we hit that 55% mark of the all-time low, 55% mark, it's open season for the block.
Now,
could I
make one suggestion?
Sure.
Instead of withholding, I mean, the tangible is a free pony from the guy with the boot on his head, Vermin Supreme.
Right.
because he's promising everybody a pony. That maybe it's a tangible that may be a guy to vote for. I have voted for him in the past, so I just like you to consider that.
Who was this guy?
You've never heard of Vermin Supreme?
No.
He's a real candidate.
I'll have to Google him.
He wears a boot on his head and promises everybody a pony. He runs every year. He's a great candidate to vote for.
Well, he throw 40 acres in with that pony. He might have my vote.
All right, everybody, have a great new year. Mo was fantastic. This show has made my year fantastic. I love the work you do. I love working with you, and I can't wait until our next show in 2020.
Show 20, the first show of 2020. Just let that soak in. And as I always say, pay attention to everything, and the truth will reveal itself.
I'll talk to you next year, Mo.
All right, see you next year, Adam.
Remember, MoFacts.com. Bye, everybody.
I know you don't love me, and there may be someone else. And as I sit alone here at home, knowing what I should do, I find I can't stay away from you. I can't stay away from you. No, I can't stay away from you. No, though I know you're no good, and I'd leave if I would, yet I can't stay away from you. No, the old times with you and me can't stay away. That's the way now it ought to be. Can't stay away. You were all I ever dreamed, and now you're so mean. Yet I can't stay away from you. You've been leaving me and deceiving me, and have told me lie after lie. The pain is so bad, and I'm going mad. Yet there's no tears in my eyes. Oh no, yet I can't stay away from you. No, I can't stay away from you. Though I know you're no good, and I'd leave if I would, yet I can't stay away from you. Can't stay away. Will there ever be an end to my persistency? Can't stay away. You always wondered why do I have tears in my eyes, and as you ask, you